What is up, everyone?
Willkommen
To another episode of the NerdBall Fantasy Football Podcast. I am your humble host, Pete Rogers, and I am joined by my fellow nerds. We have resident old man Clark Barnes and the working girl Jordan Smith. Guys, how are we doing today?
Doing great, Pete.
Pretty good. Is that a spotted cow I see?
It is a spotted cow. Well identified, Jordan. Yes. Becca went to a wedding this past weekend in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. And on her drive, she picked up some spotted cow and brought it home. So I'm enjoying Wisconsin's finest export.
Next time I come to Minnesota, I'm going to bring you some local Wisconsin brews.
Oh, I'm 100% in. Clark, you just need to somehow make your way through Minnesota at some point, and we could do a live in-person show.
I'm in. We just got to ask corporate to free up some budget for us. I'm in.
Yes.
The discretionary fund.
Exactly. We'll burn through it all to get Clark out to Minnesota. That being said, when we're all rich and famous and NerdBall is, profiting, I feel like we should attend the Fantasy Football Expo at some point. That feels like a cool gathering. And we are in the fantasy football industry, so we should be able to get ourselves in with little to no problem.
Where does this?
I'm
sorry. This is like the first time I'm hearing about a Fantasy Football Expo. Is this like Comic-Con?
Fantasy Football Expo.
Sort of.
You dress up as your favorite fantasy football analyst?
It was in Canton, Ohio, August 12th to the 14th. It's sponsored by Sports Edge.
I suppose that's probably around the Hall of Fame stuff too, right? Or is that after? I don't know.
I don't know when Hall of Fame is. But yeah, I don't know if it's every year or panels. Let's see if we would have been invited as a panel. We could have been. It says NerdBall panel, and we missed it, you guys. That was our chance to make it big.
Well, there's always next year.
I want Jordan to show up next year dressed up as Warren Sharp or dressed up as, I don't know, Danny Kelly.
It's going to be a lot of like blue button-ups and khakis.
Since I already had the mustache, I can do Warren Sharp. All right, let's talk football, specifically the fantasy variety. Jordan's going to take over the top 10 this week, and we're also bringing back a game that we have not played in quite some time to get you ready for fantasy football drafts, which, if you haven't already drafted, you got 1 week until to do that. And no better way to get prepared for your draft strategy than for us to play a quick little round of Would You Rather? Cue the music. All right. Just three little Would You Rathers here, and we'll see what you guys are vibing. These guys are all very specifically handpicked to discuss kind of ADP and our expectations for some players this season. Excuse me, that spotted cow is making me belch. Let's start with Clark. Clark, would you rather Cam Akers or Chase Edmonds this year in fantasy?
So I really like when you do these, Pete, and my first reaction is no. Like, nope, I'm not interested in either of these.
Great way to play the game, Clark.
Well, like, I'm not interested in either of these guys. I've done a little bit of best ball, and definitely in my home leagues, these guys are not ending up on my team. My call, our bad calls are starting to come to fruition as the season gets going. My Sony Michel to lead Dolphins backfield prediction probably not going to hit now, it looks like. And that's just because Chase Edmonds is a smaller guy. He's 5'9", about 200, only been in the league for 4 or 5 years, but hasn't been able to handle a big workload. Looks awesome when he's out there and makes big flash plays a la Tony Pollard. Looks great, but is not yet shown that he can be a workhorse running back. So not interested in that. Cam Akers, been in the NFL for less time, also a small guy, was someone that I was more excited about, but also hasn't shown that he's able to put it all together and be a lead back. So by default, since Cam Akers hasn't shown us he can't for as long, I'm going to go with Cam Akers. Both offenses should be super exciting. And if you get 50% of the running back production from either, I think you're going to be very happy with how much these guys cost. But long-winded, I'll give Cam Akers the slight edge.
Okay. What about you, Jordan?
Well, first I want to note that all of these would you rathers are very good. Like, it's very hard to choose one or the other and make a like concrete argument for one over the other at this point in time.
Yeah.
Gosh, I still don't even really know. I think I'm leaning slightly Cam Akers because I think he actually has a chance with Sean McVay to lead that backfield and lead the offense, even though Darrell Henderson is there. I just don't think Darrell Henderson's as talented as like Raheem Mostert in Miami, who if he stays fresh and healthy, it looks like they're going to have like a not so much a Jonathan Taylor, Nyheim Hines situation, but more of a Javonte, Melvin Gordon situation where they're both kind of just like, well, you've caught your breath, so you're going in, or we're going to hold you to a pitch count. It all depends on how efficient they are with those pitch counts. But yeah, I think I'm still leading Cam Akers just based on his ability to possibly grab the starting role and just hang on to it and get like 65% of the carries.
Nice.
I'll settle for 55.
Yeah. I'm going with Chase Edmonds, but primarily because I think if you're, as you pointed out, Jordan, and these are very strategic picks. Cam Akers and Chase Edmonds feel very similar in terms of situation, in terms of both being on what we expect to be prolific offenses, both being in backfields that have other running backs in there that could cut into their workload. The difference for me is the fact that Cam Akers is currently going per underdog ADP RB19 at pick 55, and Chase Edmonds is going RB26 pick 79. So Cam Akers, you're investing higher in him because yes, he's had larger flashes, I guess you would say, carrying an RB1 workload and being prolific from a fantasy standpoint. However, you are paying up for that. And so it's a matter of whether or not you're buying fully into Cam Akers and not super worried about Darrell Henderson, or you think that Darrell Henderson's not going to chop into that workload such to the point where paying for RB19, it's a little rich. He's going ahead of J.K. Dobbins, A.J. Dillon, Elijah Mitchell, Damian Pierce, who's everyone's favorite new running back. So a little ADP battle there. Another ADP battle. Two running backs who play similar roles in their offenses or what we expect to play similar roles. I will start with you, Jordan, this time. And that is, would you rather Tony Pollard or Kareem Hunt this year in fantasy football?
So this one I'm going with Kareem Hunt just because we've seen him basically put up top 20, top 15 running back years, even still playing with Nick Chubb. So he's just been able to handle or be efficient enough with the opportunities that he gets. Plus, the Browns are going to have Jacoby Brissett starting 11 games for them. So I'd like the backfield to put in a lot of work in that first part of the season for sure.
What do you think, Clark?
Yeah, I mean, again, these are good. I don't really like either of these, but I'm going to lean Kareem Hunt as well. I think the pie for the running back position in total in Cleveland is going to be a little bit smaller, but proven record with Kareem Hunt, being amazing and in this offense getting a big carve out. I don't know why they're not going to give Nick Chubb any third down passing game work. He seems to be quite capable of doing it, but I guess it makes sense if you have two absolute rock stars to both get them the ball. Tony Ballard is an interesting spice. He's a dash of Tony Pollard is really great, but I think the fantasy community is losing their minds about Tony Pollard a little bit. So I'll go with the proven lower ceiling, higher floor Kareem Hunt over the it's never going to happen Tony Pollard signed Alexander Madison.
the Tony Pollard, we've talked about this before. We talked about this a couple weeks ago when we were talking about Ezekiel Elliott going ridiculously low, despite the fact that he's always been an RB1 in his career. The Tony Pollard hype is a lot. He's going as the RB27 right now, pick 79, right behind Chase Edmonds. Meanwhile, you can get Kareem Hunt, RB33, pick 95. And I wrote about Kareem Hunt in my late round running backs with RB1 potential because while he finished the RB48 in half point PPR last year, Kareem Hunt, that is, it's because he only played 8 games. He was dealing with injury. He averaged 12.4 fantasy points per game, which if you extrapolate that over 17 games, he would have finished the RB9, which would have been back-to-back seasons as an RB1, as like a mid-tier RB1. So like it boggles my mind that he is going so late in drafts. And maybe it's just because there's the injury worry. But he was at RB8 in both our neck consistency and efficiency rating and per equalized fantasy points per game ratings. So like he was among the elite fantasy running backs last year in advanced stats and in points per game. He just didn't play enough games to finish as a high-level fantasy back. But we've seen it before from Kareem Hunt. We've seen it before from this offense. Clark, you said this, or maybe Jordan, you said this about Jacoby Brissett being under center for the first 11 weeks. Like this running game is going to get utilized. And Kareem Hunt going in like the 8th round, 9th round, my gosh, I'm going to have him in every single one of my leagues because he seems just like a locked in RB2 if you're playing in PPR or half point PPR. And with plenty of RB1 upside, because we've seen it before. We've seen both him and Nick Chubb sharing a backfield finish as RB1s. So Kareem Hunt, most of these I didn't think there was a right answer. Kareem Hunt is the right answer. And I'm glad you all got it. All right, our final would you rather. We're going to the wide receiver position this time. Clark, we'll start with you. Who would you rather for fantasy football in 2022? Jerry Judy or Amon-Ra St. Brown?
I get a tough one. So this is the easiest one for me. And I'm just going to pick Jerry Judy because his quarterback is Russell Wilson. Amon-Ra St. Brown had a great close to the season. He's a little bigger than I thought. I thought he was, like 5'8", 5'9" guy who just got loose and went off. I think he's like 5'11". So he's definitely tall enough in today's NFL to be a true number 1 wide receiver. Super great quicks, but plays for the Lions. Did it after everyone who had any meetings with him was injured and he was the only guy left. I hope that he does it again. I hope that the Lions bounce back and are good. And I think Amon-Ra St. Brown has shown at least enough to show like he's going to stick in the league for 8, 9, 10 years. So that's going to be awesome for him. Jerry Judy has been 100% all Alabama hype so far in his career. Hasn't done anything, but will be playing with a healthy Russell Wilson this year. And I'll just take my chances on the Broncos scoring 3 times more points than the Lions to bring home this one for Judy.
Jordan, what do you think?
I'm going to zag the other way here and go with Amon-Ra St. Brown. So I really did like the ending stretch of last season for Amon-Ra. It wasn't just like the last 3 weeks where the games didn't matter for the Lions and they were just ruining their draft position. He was tearing it up for the last 6 weeks of the season. And in those 6 weeks, he had target totals. In week 18, he had 10 targets. 15 through 17, he had 11, and then 13 and 14, he had 12 targets each. So he's just seems like he's a possession guy who has built up a pretty good rapport with Jared Goff, even though Jared Goff's not always great. Sometimes all you really need is the that connection. They play in a dome. They get to play the Vikings in a dome. They get to play an easy Bears defense twice. And the other wide receivers on this roster aren't really inspiring me that much. Like DJ Chark, I don't think is going to see a lot of footballs from Jared Goff. Josh Reynolds is another wide receiver on this football team. So I'm banking on that because I think Cortland Sutton's going to be the biggest beneficiary of Russell Wilson in Denver. It's close though. It's pretty close, I would say.
Yeah, I asked this to see where you guys are with Amon-Ra St. Brown. Jerry Judy, I'm pretty confident in I have made up my mind on Jerry Judy. I will probably not be drafting him anywhere this year in fantasy football. I think you're right, Jordan. Cortland Sutton is the guy who I see has the major upside, the major wide receiver 1 outlook with Russell Wilson under center. Jerry Judy's going wide receiver 22 ahead of Juju Smith-Schuster, who I like more, Brandon Cooks, who I like more, Rashad Bateman, who I like more, and then Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's going wide receiver 27, pick 53. And it's just a matter of like, how much stock do you put into that end of year that Amon-Ra had last year, in which he was just dominant. He was I think we just tweeted this out from the NerdBall account, was bringing it up. He was, I think, the wide receiver 2 in all of fantasy football from weeks 12 onward. From weeks 12 onward last year in half-point PPR, Amon-Ra St. Brown, second only to Cooper Kupp. Like that's a good period of time in which he was one of the top receivers fantasy wise. And so like, or was that just the product of the Lions not having anyone healthy? Or was that the product of the Lions realizing how to utilize a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown, who, like you said, Clark, is a bigger dude, and kind of, I've seen other people make this comparison that he kind of plays the big slot a la Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp was second in the NFL. I'm looking at PFF's premium stats. He was second in the NFL in slot yardage, and he played out of the slot 66% of the time. Amon-Ra St. Brown was 6th in slot yardage and played out of the slot 77% of the time. And so like, we have seen that slot position be hugely productive because you're getting a wide receiver often on linebackers or safeties, big mismatches for guys. And if you can take advantage of that, it puts up a lot of good numbers. So I'm still kind of figuring out how I feel about Amon-Ra St. Brown, but there's a lot of things that could work for him and really go in his favor. But the other thing is he plays for the Lions, and no matter how much Dan Campbell gets me hyped for the Lions, like, is this an offense that we're expecting to be extremely prolific?
No,
yeah,
it's not.
Right. So
like Goff has done
on
enough to make Kupp relevant, and he's done enough to make Amon-Ra St. Brown relevant. It's just oftentimes when I'm torn between two players, I will just lean towards the team that I think is going to be better. Which there's more opportunity to score on better teams.
Right. And that is never a bad thing to do. If you want to do a similar strategy as Clark, guys, I'm just throwing in plugs every which way. NerdBallFF.com, our own Patty Cooper, has his NFL season projections and team rankings for 2022. He has looked over 15 years of NFL data to project forward what he thinks offenses are going to be ranked and play out next year. And so if you are trying to make a decision between two players, for instance, Jerry Judy, Amon-Ra St. Brown, let's see, Patty has the Broncos projected as his 9th overall offense. The Lions, 25th. So inherently, if you want to give the edge to what you think will be the more productive offense, the Broncos would reasonably beat out the Lions there.
I sold Amon-Ra St. Brown for a first this offseason.
Oh, that's a win.
So
well
I
done.
feel like, I don't know. I mean, I think the jury's out on that one. We'll see.
This is I saw someone tweet this. I saw someone tweeting this out, and I was like, oh shit, do I do a similar thing where they sold Damian Pierce for a first because of all of his hype?
Yes.
I'm like, I do that?
You should do that. Yeah.
Okay. But I love Damian Pierce.
So in my home league, my only home league, I know nobody cares about your team, but I'm gonna talk about my team. It's a 2-keeper league. So by the time you get through about the second, third round, you're really in the 5th round.
Mm-hmm.
But Pierce got picked at the beginning of the 3rd round, and I was up in a couple picks. I was like, dang.
Yeah.
Because we have pretty good keeper rules, so it's really tough. He wasn't a 3rd round pick, but if you can get a first,
we'll see. Maybe I'll put some feelers out there in my dynasty league.
The Texans are still going to be terrible.
They
are. That is part of the equation. It's like, yeah, Damian Pierce probably locked in RB1 70-80% of the work, led by Lovie Smith. Right. I mean, it's like
all right. Well, no one in my dynasty league should listen to this podcast as Clark diminishes Damian Pierce's value.
80% of almost nothing is not great. Right. That's But we'll see.
I feel like there's
He's an
some rule
interesting-
about dividing by 0. I feel like I wish I could remember.
As we've learned from the former Oakland Raiders, we should note that you should be confident that you can nail the draft picks before you trade away potential like starters and good players for them.
The Raiders, the Raiders. It's been rough. It's been a rough string of first round picks for the Oakland Raiders or Las Vegas Raiders.
Jordan, we need to do a dynasty show instead of just hijacking this one. But what I've found, at least in the past couple of years with FFPC, is an obsession with youth. And so I now stockpile draft picks to trade for veterans right before the rookie draft.
Yeah.
Like I've been cleaning it up. I got Cooper Kupp for 105. You know, I mean, like these are just like, yeah, he's 29. Good luck with Garrett Wilson, Treylon Burks, whoever. Like I have my guys. I like London and Olave, but like I don't know.
It's also one of those things where it's like in Dynasty, it's so the allure of like a, forgive me for using the name, the allure of a dynasty in Dynasty is so great that people like, you want to get young so that you like hit on all of these players, and then you just have a team of like Jamar Chases and Justin Jeffersons, and you're just like, yes, now I can win the championship for like 5 years in a row. And A, does that actually happen? And B, while you're like stockpiling all these picks to like get all of these young, unproven talents, Clark over here is building a team of Cooper Kupps and Dalvin Cooks and Tom Brady's, and he's winning a couple of championships.
So I was gonna say before with the would you rather, I was gonna say I thought my dynasty rose-colored glasses were making me see Cam Akers slightly more favorably to Chase Edmonds, because Cam Akers is like 23 or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, the best part about Dynasty is that if you drafted like Lamar Jackson as a rookie and he's your like number one quarterback, you get to have like years of being like, I nailed that. I knew he was going to be good, and he's good. I nailed it. As opposed to redraft, which is like pretty quick and the validation's over with as soon as the season is done. You know, You're not bragging about snagging somebody from 3 years ago and doing well in the playoffs. It's like, no, you like the dynasty build because you're like, hey, I'm working towards something, man.
I want us all to go out on a limb and guess who Jordan's QB1 is in a dynasty league of his.
Oh man, dude, I've got Lamar everywhere.
I mean,
it's all
I got Malik Willis this year, and I'm just like ready for him to take over.
That is a regret. I looked at just how late he went and how late all of the quarterbacks went, and what a bad bet not first round quarterbacks are.
Yeah.
But watching Malik play this year, he should sit for a year. At least he should sit all this year. I know we're excited about preseason, but Ryan Tannehill's better. But next year, he should start. I mean, just get it over with, play for 2 years to see if you have something. He's very exciting. I mean, like, he took all of the things that we were excited about him doing in college, and most of them came with him to the NFL. And a lot of the things that we were worried about him doing in college, you can see he's obviously trying not to do them. And I know that may sound a little too simplistic, but that's not always how that goes.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know.
Just look at Zach Wilson.
Playing quarterback on a team that plays defense and runs the football, there's worse things for a young mobile quarterback to do than do that. I'm super excited. This turned into the dynasty hour on NerdBall.
Nothing wrong with that.
Hey, I got a third for Julio Jones today.
Now.
So
I know we're talking Titans. Is the beauty of Dynasty is every team is viable now. We can talk about, we can talk about everyone. All right. Well, that was a nice. I was going to say quick round of Would You Rather, but then we get on tangents, as we are known to do. That's just the way the show operates. Let's move on then to our second and other segment of the show. We're going to do top 10. But wait, what's that? The top 10 has been stolen. It's been taken away. It's gone. Whose music is that? Could it be Jordan's 11 stealing the coveted top 10? Oh my goodness. Jordan, name your team who's stolen the top 10. Where has it gone? What a great caper.
Cue the Steven Soderbergh heist music because we have taken over the top 10. And I'm just calling it Jordan's 11. I've been kicking around this idea. I was gonna write it out, but I figure it's probably more fun to be in like a audio format. Basically, what I did is it's not a ranking by any means, but I related each of Danny Ocean's 11 to a player or kind of like a draft situation. So I have the characters, what each of them means, and a player to associate with those categories.
Perfect. God, I'm so excited. This is for people who listened to last year's show. Jordan, where Jordan and I would do the starts and sits show. Jordan also there decided to go freelance and do movie quotes to encapsulate his vibe for his starts and sits. And let me tell you, as someone who is also an avid cinema head, could not be more excited to see what Jordan has in store for the rest of the show.
Well, let's dive right into it. So the main man, the Danny Ocean of the crew, aka the George Clooney. This one I just sorted through as the first round pick. Like, this is the guy that I think is probably the 101 in most leagues, and we don't have to spend a whole lot of time on this just because I feel like it's strongly consensus, and I don't think anybody's going to push too hard on me saying that Jonathan Taylor is the Clooney this year. I just think he's the best back in football. He doesn't have a real threat to take away carries. Touches from Nyheim Hines, sure, but I think that overall the carries are just going to go to Jonathan Taylor most because he's just the most effective guy to do that. He has a new quarterback, Matt Ryan. We'll talk a little bit about him later. So that will help things open up for Taylor as well. And according to Sharp Football Stats, speaking of Warren Sharp, the Colts have the third easiest schedule in the league. So that could mean a lot of carries late in the game for Jonathan Taylor to just sort of kill clock if the Colts are truly the dominant team in that division, like a lot of people are predicting. I don't know if I'm completely sold, but just having seen them as like the third easiest schedule is pretty like enlightening to me. I kind of want more Colts on my fantasy teams now.
Yeah,
That's a huge lean indicator for me. It doesn't impact who I think is like, it's not going to move you from the third round to the second round or something like that for me. But when you're doing the would you rather, and it's Dalvin Cook versus Alvin Kamara, if Warren Sharp has the Vikings as like third easiest and Saints as like 28th, well, both those guys are close enough for me, so I'm going to go with Cook. One of the silly things about arguing about the first or second overall pick in fantasy is that when you do it reasonably, it's not very shocking and it may not be pod worthy. I disagree that Jonathan Taylor is the 101, but if he falls to me at 102, I am ecstatic. I mean, he's very good. He is a lead running back in a league where there aren't a lot of league running backs. I'm a McCaffrey guy. Like, I'm ready to be hurt again. I think that his highs are just so high that he's worth it. But like, everything Jordan said's good. Taylor is amazing.
Yeah. Perfect casting. He also feels like a man who could scheme up an elaborate heist, bringing together 10 other randos.
Well, let's just take a look at his right-hand man.
Why not?
The Rusty Ryan, aka Brad Pitt. So this one I decided was going to be the second to third round pick that might still just outplay your top guy. So this guy could even outplay Jonathan Taylor. I'm not like counting that out. And he'll probably be more of a second round pick, if not a first. But I don't see this guy in otherwise leagues that are incredibly deep from top to bottom with this player's team. I don't see him going 101. And that person is Aaron Jones. As a pass catcher in the Packers offense, I think this could just push Jones past a lot of running backs in fantasy scoring. I brought this up last week, but he only had 4 touchdowns on the ground. And I think that could just change as he and A.J. Dillon get more red zone work without Devontae Adams in the mix.
For sure.
Also, in the past 3 seasons, Aaron Jones hasn't finished like a second-round running back. He's been RB10, RB5, and RB2. His current ADP is RB11 at 18th overall. So if I, like I said last week, if I get Aaron Jones as in the second round as my first running back, or even as my second, then I'm feeling pretty good about my situation.
Perfect casting. Love it. 100%. Aaron Jones also just has the vibe of Brad Pitt in that he's just a chill dude who performs when he needs to perform. But outside of that, you're just kind of like, yeah, good for you, Aaron Jones. We've talked about him on this show enough. Like, I think we're all consensus is we are all ecstatic about Aaron Jones's potential this year in fantasy.
Agree 100%.
Next up, the Linus Caldwell, aka the Matt Damon. Part of me still can't believe these three were all in a movie together.
The whole cast of this movie is impeccable.
Isn't Marky Mark in this movie?
No, but that would have taken the cake.
Wow.
I think you're thinking of not The Town, but
I know who's in The Town. One of the best movies ever made. I appreciate you guys letting me come along with your youngness. This is always fun for me.
Are you thinking Boogie Nights?
No.
No, there's one where it's Marky Mark. It's a heist movie.
Oh, The Departed.
Yeah,
No.
The Departed. I knew it was the something. I don't know why I blanked out on that right now. I'm in football mode. The Linus is basically the everyman player, and this is a player that isn't sexy, but what Linus does in the film, and that's just kind of blends in. And this player, to me, not just this season, but for the past couple seasons, has always been DJ Moore. He's just a player that for PPR finishes has been wide receiver 18, 23, and 16. So not exactly a guy who's pushing your team over the top, but he has like a pretty decent floor. And he's just going to be able to fill your lineup as a wide receiver 2 with double-digit points. You can plug him in, not have to worry about him not producing in some way. He's the number 1 wide receiver in Carolina. He's got a better QB, and he has like a ton of targets that can come his way. Like last season, he had 163 targets. And those became available with McCaffrey got hurt. Curtis Samuel wasn't there. Terrace Marshall never showed up the way we might have thought. Robbie Anderson is still kind of a go ball guy. I'm not sure how Baker Mayfield will mesh with him as a receiver, just because, I mean, we saw what he did in Cleveland, and he wasn't exactly Mr. Hit Odell in stride down the field every single time. And then I think their recent trade today for Laviska Shenault kind of suggests that the Panthers aren't really that satisfied with their receiving room. We've seen them just not be afraid to make moves in position groups, whether that's quarterback or whether that's wide receiver. Now, if they don't feel like they've got it, they're going to add a player that they think is going to help them. As soon as Laviska gets up to speed, things might change for Moore, but I don't think it's going to change that much.
Yeah. DJ Moore, I want to read you his stat lines from 2019, 2020, 2021, and I want you to tell me what stands out. 2019, 135 targets, 87 catches, 1,175 yards, 4 touchdowns. 2020, 118 targets, 66 receptions, 1,193 yards, 4 touchdowns. 2021, 163 targets, 93 catches, 1,157 yards, 4 touchdowns. He hasn't recorded more than 4 touchdowns in a single season in his career. Like, he is, all of those finishes that Jordan just said, where he was a high-end wide receiver 2, have come with him scoring basically no touchdowns. And if he has any kind of positive touchdown regression this season, he is a high-end wide receiver 2, fringe wide receiver 1, maybe even a high-end wide receiver 1, and he's going, at the value where he's going wide receiver 15 in underdog right now. I think he's a perfect pick of a guy who you draft as your wide receiver 2, and you just let it ride, and you are happy as can be because he's consistently going to give you wide receiver 2, maybe even wide receiver 1 numbers.
Yeah, Moore's a fantastic player who's just been, in fantasy terms, a huge disappointment. I think largely because the situation, it's there's a long list, Andre Johnson, Allen Robinson, he just needs his chance. And this year he will be playing with the best quarterback he's ever played with. The declining Cam Newton notwithstanding. But boy, I just can't. Yeah. I love DJ Moore. I've never had him on a team.
Me neither, because he's just not that sexy of a pick. He's not the guy you want to give up, like, to bring it back to Dynasty. He's not the guy you want to give up a ton of really good assets for. You kind of want it to be like the perfect, I'm adding more because I want to, but I'm also giving you equal value. You know what I'm saying? You're not overpaying for DJ Moore by any means. Also, if you guys think of other players while I'm talking about this and rambling with these concepts, feel free to add in, because I feel like when I finally came up with the concepts, the player kind of they started to pop up pretty quickly. So
I think so far you're batting 1,000, Jordan.
So next up, Frank Catton, aka Bernie Mac, RIP. This player is the con man, the player you think will win your league, but they are going to trick us all. This one was a little bit harder because I don't want to plant my flag on somebody being a bust for the entire season. That's really hard to do. But I will say, with my past experience with this player, Joe Mixon, I just don't feel like he's an RB1 to me. He played really well last season, but I don't know if he's your fantasy team carrier. I think you would be better off if Joe Mixon goes off the board first. I would feel much happier being like, oh, Aaron Jones is still there. I'm going to grab him instead. And I would count that as a W. Last year, there were at least 3 games where he also had saved his production with a touchdown, which isn't great. And then he ended the season with a 5-game stretch of fewer than 4 yards per attempt. Just looking at his yards per attempt numbers, and I think the Bengals offensive line might be a little bit better this year, but at the same time, I don't know. Mixon's always kind of been short on the yardage side of things. I'm hearing reports out of camp that they also like Chris Evans, so he might be in relief in a pass catching role that like Gio Bernard just couldn't fill. Watching Chris Evans last year, he seemed pretty damn good when he got onto the field. To bring this back to sharp football stats again, the Bengals have the 6th most difficult schedule. And my biggest question with the team overall, and I want to ask you guys, are we sure there won't be a Super Bowl hangover for these guys? Everybody's really confident they're going to like wreck the AFC still.
Yeah, they feel like a team. I think Joe Mixon's, again, a perfect casting because I feel the exact same way about Joe Mixon. I have felt about it all of the time, where he's going as the RB7 right now in underdog ADP, which feels very early, ahead of Saquon or ahead of DeAndre Swift, ahead of Aaron Jones. Like, those are all guys who I think I'd rather have over. I know I'd rather have over Joe Mixon. If there is any kind of regression to this offense, then it feels like that is possible and maybe even likely. I don't know. I'm certainly staying away from Joe Mixon this year because I think I've just had maybe biases against him, and he's just going still too early for me, where I would not feel comfortable for him to be my RB1. And that's what you have to draft him as.
Yeah, I'm with you on all fronts. Mixon broke out after, he's played okay. And then in a year where the Bengals just
everything clicked,
outstandingly outproduced all of their expected numbers. Yeah. They were runners up in the Super Bowl and played great. They could do that again, because the most likely time that you go on runs is when you have a good young quarterback, and they have a good young quarterback, but it's going to be an uphill battle. And Mixon is another one of those guys, not on my team. I understand why he's going around Saquon Barkley, DeAndre Swift, and those guys. I think Aaron Jones is a tier above him, but those guys, it's like, yeah, huge question marks who could just absolutely pop off. Joe Mixon could just fall into the end zone 17 times again. And we sound silly for saying this, but I haven't ended up with him once this season.
Yeah. And that's a really good point, Clark, because Joe Mixon was 4th in the NFL last year in red zone touchdowns. And I think was like 6th, or certainly top like 6 or 7 in red zone attempts. And if we're, again, a prolific offense that gets into the red zone and hands it off to their running back, touchdowns are king in fantasy football, no matter what league you play in. And so there is a really good chance that this 13 touchdowns that he had last year becomes more of a norm for him. And it's not the kind of 5 to 7 that he had been averaging prior to that. If he has any kind of touchdown regression though, then that is worrisome in terms of his final finishings.
Yeah, to be a little bit more positive on anybody who might have Mixon on their teams right now, I also think that he could kind of be at the Damon of this squad as well. Like he's not blowing anybody out of the water, I don't think, with his week to week performances, and that's kind of what you want out of a first round pick. You want the guy who's like the Cooper Kupp, the Christian McCaffrey, the Devontae Adams, the Jamar Chase, even some of those wide receivers, the guys who are just like dunking on the other person's team every week, no matter what, they cannot make up that difference between first round picks. I think Joe Mixon's just easiest one in the first round that you can make up his points, basically.
Yeah.
Next, the Ruben Tishkoff, aka Elliott Gould. This guy is the benefactor of our little high squad, and this is just a player on a team that will help another player succeed. So this one isn't necessarily a fantasy specific player, but he could draw you to bring your attention towards the Jacksonville Jaguars as viable fantasy options this year. And that's right guard Brandon Sherf, staying on brand here. He is already one of the highest graded players on the Jacksonville team. He's basically just a bulldozer in the running game, and he has been holding up really well in pass protection. He's going to anchor just the inside of that Jags offensive line, who already has pretty decent bookend tackles. This will just allow Trevor Lawrence to step up in the pocket, to stay clean. It'll allow James Robinson to run a little bit more free. Travis Etienne, coming back from injury, will be a very interesting player. And this signing from the offseason just does a thing that a few other teams do, and I love it when they do that. And it's just get your young QB a stud lineman. Lawrence is currently QB 18, so he's not going until like 13th or 14th round. And I just think having an anchor in the line to make it better will help him outplay that position.
Yeah. Two things. One, Trevor Lawrence, low-key rushing floor. Just throwing that out there. Two, Travis Etienne, for not having played a snap of football, is going as the RB16, pick 36. Is that too early? Is that right? Is that too late? I think I'm kind of getting irrationally high on Travis Etienne this year. But I need someone to check me, because that feels like it feels right, but maybe even a little low. I don't know. Am I crazy for like wanting Etienne over Leonard Fournette? Yes, no, maybe so.
Etienne was very or not Etienne. Leonard Fournette was also very close to being the Frank Catton con man, because I'm not sure if he's going to be a very good fantasy option this year with the Tampa Bay offensive line seemingly in shambles.
Yeah. I don't know. My Etienne feels like a guy who either it was like Brandon Ayuk last year, where everyone was like, Brandon Ayuk, this is it. We saw some flashes, like this is it. This is the year. Then Debo took off. Travis Etienne feels like the guy who it could be that this year, where it's like everyone's like, yep, Etienne, he's coming back. This is going to be amazing. And then maybe he might still outperform James Robinson, but maybe he doesn't outperform James Robinson as much as the difference in their ADP, because James Robinson is going what, like RB 45.
I think James Robinson, you got to put it on APB for him. He's been missing for a while. Betting against James Robinson has been the wrong decision for James Robinson's entirely short career.
Clark loves
selfishly,
the Jaguars.
I'm just so happy that people are building up the Jaguars.
Oh, no.
Because it's not fun if everyone knows their team is going to be bad and then their team is bad. You need hope first. And People are so hopeful on the Jaguars, and I can't wait. I mean, I'll be there January 1st in Houston. Come see me at the game. I'll be enjoying all of it.
Oh boy, Jordan, let's keep casting, baby.
All right, so this one is a combined one because these guys they play the same. They're twins in the movie. They're brothers, Virgil and Turk Malloy, aka Casey Affleck and the great Scott Conn. And this category is the best player in handcuff duo or the best stack. Because I've been past couple of years just incredibly huge on stacking my fantasy teams. In this case, I chose Josh Allen and Stefan Diggs. To me, it was between two pairs rather. And the other one was Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. But I just think that Allen is just, of course, a better fantasy QB with that running upside. And even though I think Gabe Davis is a capable player, I feel like the hype on him has reached a peak that has gone a little bit higher than his capabilities might suggest. I hope I'm wrong about that, but it's just Gabe Davis. Hey guys, Stefan Diggs is the wide receiver 1 there, and he's really good. And I just think there's more room in Buffalo for Stefan Diggs to be that guy. Just Cincinnati, you're still talking about T. Higgins. You're still talking about Tyler Boyd. Like, those guys are very good players who should still be involved. So I think more targets. And Cincinnati's has a more difficult strength of schedule than the Bills. I talked about Cincinnati's strength of schedule before. What was it? Third hardest? Nope, 6th most difficult. The Bills have the 18th easiest, which is pretty fun to think about if you're also looking at other players on that team that aren't the running back room.
Yeah.
I think this is like
James Cook.
I think this is like the she's all that stack of like there's just this obviously beautiful thing that's being overlooked because it's got overalls and glasses. Like,
exactly.
I don't know why people haven't been talking about Stefan Diggs and Josh Allen. Maybe it's just because it's so simple, but where Josh Allen and Stefan Diggs are going, you have to hope you're near the end of the first round of the draft to snag Diggs. But then you've got a couple of rounds to get Allen. I mean, like, Gabe Davis could be awesome also. And James Cook could go off also. And Stefan Diggs could still put up 1,600 yards and 10 touchdowns. I like this one. I mean, Diggs is undervalued. I don't know why we haven't been talking about him. I guess the new thing is always more interesting, but Diggs and Allen as a stack, just unbelievable.
Yeah. The only other stack that I'd put out a shout out for is the Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews, because you're getting an elite tight end and his quarterback. And a quarterback who has an immense, we all love Lamar Jackson, and without Marquise Brown there, I know Rashad Bateman, we're all expecting and we're excited about Rashad Bateman, but it also feels like this season could open with Lamar Jackson just like looking Mark Andrews' way like 15 times a game, and getting the two of those stacked seems pretty saucy in my opinion. But love some Josh Allen, Stefan Diggs stacks.
I'm having fun looking up all of these characters as you name them. This is fun.
Elliot Gould was probably a fun one to look at in this movie, just with the glasses and the robe. And
Ruben is an A+ character, one of the best.
Pete, I feel like you're reading my mind here because I almost put Isaiah Likely actually as the Ruben because I was connecting, like, if the Ravens have like a strong 2 tight end set again, that's only good news for Lamar and Mark and J.K. Dobbins or Kenyon Drake or Mike Davis or whoever's running the ball in Buffalo.
Yeah.
I think we should definitely temper our expectations with Isaiah Likely.
He's not a tight end. He's not a tight end 1, Clark.
I mean, the bar for tight end 1 we've talked about on this podcast is very low, Pete, in fantasy terms. But I mean, the Ravens run 3 tight end sets, like in the middle of the field. So it's a reasonable thing to think Isaiah Likely could get, 50 catches, 450 some odd yards, and like 4 touchdowns this year, which for a rookie 4th round tight end is unbelievable. So he is showing us that he can play. He's on a team that has almost no wide receiver competition, who runs a bunch of big tight end sets anyway. I'm super excited for Likely, but I want to temper those expectations. Like, he's a draft in the 13th round so you can keep him for an 11th next year type of guy.
He doesn't have to produce this year, but like if he can get on the field and force the opposing defense to see, okay, Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, they're going big, let's go big. And now Lamar Jackson's running away from those linebackers that you just put out on the field.
And those two just split out. Like, that's going to be so nice if Mark Andrews and Likely, on the end of each line, other team responds, bringing in 4 linebackers, and they just split out. Like,
just trips right, bunch, Mark Andrews, Likely, Rashad Bateman, and just toss it out to the guy.
And just go.
Not a lot of speed out there on the corner, but sure-handed trio.
But hit play. All right, what do we have? We still have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We got cruise through these, Jordan.
Okay.
We're having too much good discussion.
The Livingston Dell, Eddie Jemison, the sweatiest guy in movies, is the player I have zero confidence in. I had no confidence in Livingston doing anything in these films. And it's Michael Thomas. So I didn't want to go too low on this for a player I didn't have any confidence in, because it's like, well, yeah, he's a freaking 18th round pick. Of course not. But he's being drafted at wide receiver 28, and I don't know. Maybe it's just a personal thing. I just don't think in the last 18 months he's shown anything or said anything to make us believe that he's still a top 30 wide receiver. He had injuries and just overall weirdness derail 2020, and that affected his 2021. He was a top 10 wide receiver in the 4 seasons prior, but we have to remember in the past 18 months, Drew Brees left. That QB situation is just worse now. Even though I still think Jameis is a starting caliber QB, it just is worse when you go from Drew Brees to Jameis Winston. And then there are also just better options for me, I think, behind Thomas on the draft board at this spot. Like Chris Godwin, I still think is a great wide receiver. Amon-Ra St. Brown, who I picked over Jerry Judy. Elijah Moore, who is a popular breakout candidate. Adam Thielen, an old head who people are saying gets back to form. I just would rather take one of those guys that I think I have a little bit more knowledge of. And I don't know. I don't trust Michael Thomas at wide receiver 28. I think that's too high for him.
Yeah.
Vehemently disagree. I think Thomas is an easy top 24 wide receiver this year, but all the points you made are valid. And that's why we're talking about him in the 20s versus what he used to be, which was, the wide receiver 1, lest we forget. That was also with Drew Brees. All of the Saints changes coming to fruition this year give me so much pause.
It makes me very trepidatious in touching anyone in that team, except for Jameis. I love me some Jameis. I can't get enough of Jameis.
Speaking of people who love touching, Jameis Winston this year should pilot the Saints to at least a decent record. Wait, what?
No. He's no. Yes, well said, Clark. What a segue.
Great offensive line. There'll be plenty of time for Michael Thomas to get open. I don't know how much I like Chris Olave. He wasn't my favorite wide receiver in the draft.
It's just a matter of whether or not almost 30-year-old Michael Thomas can recuperate from missing a full season of the NFL. Let me tell you, Clark, as a 30-year-old, if I missed the whole season of the NFL, I'd be done. We'll see. I was trying to think of a player who I had zero confidence in for comparison, and no one's David Montgomery. Zero confidence in David Montgomery. I'm not drafting him in any single one of my leagues.
He's so late. And he's so good. I know it's touching
David Montgomery. Not touching him.
I almost picked David Montgomery for this too, but I didn't want to seem like such a hater. All these listeners are Packers fans. So I can't come off the top rope and be like, David Montgomery
sucks.
Montgomery, huge value. Montgomery, horrible team. I mean, like, he should be sitting next to Damian Pierce.
He's just not he's not efficient. He's not efficient with this. There are running backs that are going around him who I'd much rather have, who have much higher upside.
Upside, but that's not it. It's a risk calculation of upside versus likelihood to hit the upside. Yeah,
I mean,
sorry. Making enemies.
I liked Khalil Herbert last year too.
Yeah, well, he got injured. Is he? I don't know how much time he's missing, but
is he back?
Never mind.
I don't know if he's back or not.
I thought he did something bad. Why don't you give us your next casting while I figure out how long Khalil Herbert is injured for?
The next one is Basher. Don Cheadle with. I love my guy Don Cheadle, but it's one of the more curious accent words.
I don't know what accent it is.
And this is the player most likely to provide boom or bust weeks. And I'm giving this honor to Chase Claypool, as boom or bust has essentially defined his career to this point. And the QB situation just isn't any less erratic than it has been the past 2 years. Last year, he was targeted plenty of times. And he posted like a couple of double-digit weeks, but his lack of touchdown potential really hurt his fantasy viability. There's a chance that he gets some positive touchdown regression in a real way, because he only scored 2 last season. 2 touchdowns for Chase Claypool. That's Julio Jones level, I'm afraid of the end zone type shit. And I just think the uneven QB play in a lackluster offensive line, which this offensive line is pretty bad. It might prevent me from calling Claypool an all-out boom player. I think there are certainly going to be weeks that he finds the end zone and boosts everybody up 22, 23 fantasy points. But when we get down to the goal line, if Najee Harris's foot injury isn't a huge thing, it's like, I feel like they just want to turn around and take the ball out of Trubisky Rudolph's hands. Like, the only way I'll call Claypool an all-out boom player is if Kenny Pickett starts from the onset. I don't think Mason Rudolph or Mitch Trubisky is helping anybody on this squad.
Can I nominate DK Metcalf as an honorary basher as well?
Oh man,
I feel like he's gonna have a couple weeks where you're just like, fuck yes, DK, you are carrying my team, and then like him and Gino are gonna look great to start, and then you're gonna get a lot of real bad weeks, and it's gonna be terrible.
I think both these guys are good picks for this. I should probably recuse myself from this in a dynasty league that Nick bought a Ford and I share. Which learning a lot of lessons about dynasty here. Early this offseason, I'm in on Chase Claypool. I think he's excellent. I think he's underrated. We first for Claypool this year. Next year's first. It was an exciting time. Rookie drafts were coming in. Boy, that looks like a huge mistake. It looks like Claypool's going to be playing out of the slot, which should be good for him. He's not very good at contested catches, even though there's some good highlight plays from him. The Steelers' offensive line, I don't know if y'all caught.
It ain't good.
Any of the preseason. Boy, there's a lot of bad lines in the NFL. That one seems to clearly be absolutely, without question, the worst. And they were playing their starters. It's going to be a rough. I'm trying to bail on Najee in a couple of leagues. It's not going to be good, I don't think.
No. Yeah. Najee might just have the amount of workload to make him be able to overcome it, but it's not going to be efficient.
Najee Harris, first player ever with over 400 touches for under 1,000 yards, type lines.
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah, I think you have a problem as a team if your line is bad, but it's even worse if you have Mitch Trubisky standing behind that line. So,
yeah,
Pittsburgh last in the AFC North. That's all I'll say. Next up, we have the amazing Yen, played by Keen Xiaobo. This is just the finesse player. He's a guy we'll talk about heating up the waiver wire after week 1, because there's always that one guy that people are just spending all of their fab on after week 1 because they're like, this guy just lit it up. And it reminded me of a situation that happened last year with Elijah Mitchell when he became a hot commodity. Almost immediately, nobody drafted him. Everybody went to the waiver wire. But I think the same team might have the exact same situation this year. because I'm calling Jeff Wilson as my finesse player. He's the primary backup to Elijah Mitchell right now, who is projected to play week 1, but he's also nursing a hamstring injury, so we don't know how much that's going to be affected him. And if Mitchell re-injures himself and Wilson plays well enough, he could just end up taking over the backfield and being the starter. Because like Shanahan has been known to play just whomever he feels can give him the best chance to win. He's seemingly at random throws players into the doghouse. And right now, Jeff Wilson is just the RB61. Like nobody's drafting him. And I think another guy like this could be Adam Troutman for the Saints. Taysom Hill is technically ahead of him on the depth chart, but they don't really use Hill as like put him at the end of the line and make him block in the running game. He's kind of more of a gadget player. But Troutman's entering his 3rd year, which is a popular year for tight ends to break out. And he's reportedly feeling more comfortable.
I think you could say any running back in the 49ers backfield could wear this tag, because there's also been so much hype about Tyrion Davis Price. And then also evidently now Trey Sermon is good. and Kyle Shanahan is like praising Trey Sermon.
Niners running back.
So any Niners
you should have one though. Pick one and dedicate a roster spot to it.
Yeah. I don't know who it is, but one of these 3 running backs in San Francisco is going to make everyone burn their fab on him, and it might hit and it might not. You never know. But I'm glad in my Dynasty League I've held on to my Trey Sermon shares, because man, seeing a small amount of praise getting directed his way has filled my heart with joy.
So looking this guy up on the fly, he looks like a little fella, and I think I remember him from the movie doing some pretty amazing little fella things. And I think someone who might fit that mold this year is KJ Hamler. Just I'm playing with Russell Wilson and I can catch the football. So, not someone I think for fantasy that we need to worry about starting every week, but he may turn into an interesting bye week fill in, and he's going to have some of those games where it's like 3 for a 120 and a touchdown because he breaks a long one. So yeah, that might be a smaller diminutive player who puts up big numbers for us this year.
I like that.
I think that's an even better category. It's just the little guy, like KJ Hamler, Michael Carter, just small, Naheem Hines, just small dudes who are going to pack a punch. Boston Scott, find some Boston Scott stock.
Love it. Love all that.
Lastly is the Saul Bloom, played by the great Carl Reiner. And this is just the veteran. He's the old head that can still put up good fantasy numbers. You might be a little bit scared because they're old and you want a young guy, but at age 37, Matt Ryan may be football old, but he's still a young guy and he can still sling it. He was QB 20 last year, which doesn't inspire a lot of confidence, but if you watched the Atlanta Falcons at any point, you saw exactly how that was possible. He's on a much more talented Colts roster with a much easier schedule. Prior to last season, even Ryan was QB 12, QB 10, and QB 2 just before. He's again not the flashiest category player. You could probably put him in the Damon spot as well, just because he has zero rushing upside. He's a statue back there. But he's the perfect prospect if you're the type to wait in your draft for a quarterback and not reach to grab a stud like the Kyler Murrays or the Patrick Mahomes. He's currently going in the 11th round, so you have plenty of time to sit on your hands and wait for him to come to you. Last year in this offense, Carson Wentz somehow managed to have a 27-7 touchdown interception ratio. And if Wentz can do that, I think that Matt Ryan might get closer to 30 TDs. Also, Carson Wentz had a 94.6 QB rating last year, so he was still pretty decent passing the ball. His QBR is much lower, though. Don't look at that.
He was very more statistically. He was much more statistically interesting than he was if you go back and watch the game. Like you look at the numbers, you're like, these are two different players. This is not what I saw, and that should give people a lot of hope for Matt Ryan.
Yeah, Matt Ryan and just Colts fans overall are just going to have a much more easier time watching this player than you were with Carson Wentz. Also, I want to add that PFF is saying the Colts have the 10th best offensive line in the league. That line is anchored by my large adult son, Quentin Nelson. Now, Trevor Lawrence is going a few slots after Ryan, but if you're like Clark and maybe you're a little bit more hesitant on the Jags, you want to have just this veteran QB who has a high floor. I think Matty Ice is just that guy. He's very good, like second QB too. If you went high for like Lamar and you need somebody for bye week relief potentially or injury relief, he's just that solid guy.
Yeah, I like it. I've long been a Matty Ice fan, partially because he went to Boston College. But yeah, and it's a good Colts offense, an underrated one. I know that there's like trying to figure out who that wide receiver 2 is going to be, who's going to like be running side with Michael Pittman Jr., who everyone is very, very high on. But you got Jonathan Taylor there. Nyheim Hines, I think, is going to have a really good role this year. I like that you mentioned him for the small guy award. Matt Ryan, he feels like every year I feel like there's like one maybe, and I have nothing to back this up other than pure feeling, one kind of like older veteran quarterback who you're like, oh, wow, they did that. That's pretty impressive. And Matty Ice, I mean, my go-to is Tom Brady because the man's just not mortal. But Matty Ice feels like a good contender to like come into that Colts offense, show that he still has some juice left in his arm and maybe throw for like 28, 30 touchdowns and be saucy in the AFC.
If Paris Campbell comes out and looks like as good and as smooth and fluid as he did in 2020 before another injury derailed him, I think he's the number 2, and I think he could be really good.
Love it. Well done, Jordan.
Those are Jordan's 11.
Jordan's 11, a perfect casting for Ocean's 11 with players, many players, a lot of good guys who we wouldn't necessarily touch on. But delightful as always. All right. Well, there you go. That's all we got for you this week. Make sure you rate and subscribe to the podcast on your podcast platform of choice and go follow us on Twitter at NerdBallFF. You can follow myself at Pete M. Rogers, follow Clark at NFL Clark, and Jordan at Jordan_Smith27. And make sure, of course, you check out all the amazing content that we're putting out over on the site at NerdBallFF.com. If you're drafting this coming weekend, we've got our draft guide that you can purchase for a mere $10 or join our Patreon, and it's free. With rankings, we've got top 150 consensus. We've got all kinds of stats breakdown, advanced metrics, and season-long projections that you can get. So make sure you go check that out. And then, of course, on the site, as I mentioned, Patty has an article projecting the season stats. Jordan has been putting up his dynasty startup rankings. I have late-round running backs with RB1 upside. Clark just did a mock draft starting picking 4th overall, so you can see what his thought is going in through that. So make sure you check out all that stuff. Again, nerdballff.com. Until next week, my fellow nerds, and then football starts.
We're almost there.
So close.